Welcome to The Third Story. I'm your host, Leo Sidran. Today's episode features my friend, the great singer, songwriter, sometimes radio personality, and recent web series star, Anya Marina. Anya is going to tell us her whole story in just a minute, so I'm not going to give you too much other than to tell you I love what she does. I love the sound of her voice. I love writing songs with her, and I think she's a really special songwriter. I met her a few years ago. We were set up on a co-writing session to try to write a song together, and we did. We wrote a song together the first time we met, which is, you know, something that professional songwriters do all the time, but the fact of the matter is it's a challenge, and it has a lot to do with personal chemistry, and it has to do with the energy that happens in the room between two people when they first get together. And in our case, we wrote a really interesting song called Something Sweet, and I have to tell you a little anecdote about that song, because Anya and I wrote a song. We met and we wrote a song. She ultimately put that song on her record Paper Plane that came out a few years ago. But before it came out, before anybody had heard it, she sent it around to a few of her friends. She was so excited about it. And one of the people she sent it to was the Cuban singer-songwriter Alex Cuba. Alex heard it and called me up right away and said, I heard the song that you wrote and produced for Anya Marina, and I think I want you to produce my next record. There's something about the way you treated her voice. There's something about the sound of her voice on that recording that gives me the sense that you're my producer. And I said, sounds great, Alex. And he came to New York. We worked together on the album Healer. As a matter of fact, there is a previous Third Story podcast episode in which I talked to Alex late night after hours in the studio while we're recording that record. And it was an auspicious conversation because the album itself went on to win a Latin Grammy, and it was nominated for a Grammy at the big time Grammys that year. What I didn't ever get around to telling Alex Cuba is that I didn't do anything to Anya's voice. It's just the sound of her voice. You know, I took the gig happily, and I was glad that he liked what I did with her voice, but I went back to that session, and I opened it up and listened to what I had done to Anya's voice, and the truth was it was already there by the time I got my hands on it. So that's the kind of singer she is. She just has a very natural comfort in the studio, and it seems to me that every time she sings on the mic, it sounds like a record. So that's all I'm going to tell you about Anya. The rest of the story is going to lay out for you right now. A few little housekeeping matters. Number one, you know this already, but in case you're new, third-story.com is the place for you. You go there and you check out all the previous episodes, like the one I mentioned earlier with Alex Cuba and many, many others. You can also sign up, subscribe. All my socials are there. And if you want to get involved, as I say, on a deeper level, there's a link to the Patreon page. Speaking of Patreon, folks, I don't often get to say this, but this has been a big week at Patreon for the Third Story podcast. We got some new patrons, wonderful letters from the new folks, and I appreciate it enormously. It's just a jolt of positivity in my life when I get one of those messages or I get a little ping that somebody else is supporting it. So I'm glad that this is reaching you. I'm glad that it's resonating, and I'm glad that you felt so inspired that you reached into your wallet and put some money on the table for us to keep making these episodes. Two other little things I feel compelled to say, as a matter of fact. Number one, the new Third Story podcast theme song, which I've been using since January. I told the story when I first wrote it and produced it, and I put it up on the podcast, and I'll just briefly remind you. I interviewed Kenny Warner for the podcast. He's a piano player and an inspiring teacher. I came home after that interview, sat down at the piano, and immediately started improvising. About 45 minutes, I think. I don't really know. When it was all over, I kind of came out of that fugue state of having played the piano and just let my fingers lead me and my ear lead me around. I discovered that I had inadvertently recorded that improvisation, and I checked it out and decided I'm going to use that as the basis for the music, the new theme music for the Third Story podcast. Why do I tell you this story now again? Because finally, I put it out there to be heard in its entirety, in all of its beautiful, nuanced ridiculousness, and it's available on SoundCloud, on the Third Story SoundCloud page, also YouTube, and also on Bandcamp. Links to all of that are available at third-story.com. The other thing that I guess I need to tell you is that I have a new single coming out this week, Back in Barcelona. It's going to come out on Friday. And the reason it's relevant to us today is because there are two people on this track, Back in Barcelona. The first is me. The other is my guest, Anya Marina, who joins me to sing on the track with me. So it seems like a good time to put this interview up. Here she is, my friend, the great Anya Marina.
Okay, are we doing like a Mark Maron thing where you just start recording and then I'm like, oh my God, are we recording? And then you're like, yeah, we're doing it.
The fact that you're asking what we're doing on this only proves to me that you have never heard my podcast.
I mean, is that a requirement? I didn't want it to interfere with our friendship.
That could happen, couldn't it? That like we're friends, we like each other.
Yep.
We work together. And then you listen to my podcast.
Yeah. Have you watched my web series?
I have. Oh. I've commented on it.
Okay.
I've sent you text message comments.
I listened to half of a podcast.
You did?
With someone. Yeah. I'm going to keep listening. I'm really going to do that.
Has it ever happened to you, Anya Marina, my friend, that you become friends with somebody and then either you discover what they do and like them less, or they discover what you do and it changes the relationship?
Like them less, or they like me less?
Or just changes the way you feel about them in one way or another?
It's so bad when you're dating someone and then you realize that you don't love their work. And then you're just like, it's too late. You're all in and you have to just support them. That's a bummer when that happens. And then when you're dating someone, I just started dating someone and he's a bit of a luminary, I guess, in his field. And I won't tell you what he does. It doesn't matter. But I will say that he's very talented and he's an expert in his field. And I thank God was not that familiar with his work because I think it would have colored my, I don't know, like it would have affected how I was behaving. It definitely would have made me more self-conscious. Mm-hmm. And then eventually I got to the point where I said, why don't you send me one or two things that you're really proud of that feel like essentially you. And then he was excited about that and he did. And then I got like a huge crush on him. And I was grateful that I hadn't gone overboard because it does color things. I think you can almost get starstruck with somebody. So I don't listen to your podcast because I don't want to get starstruck with you.
This is good what we have going here.
Yeah, it's a great friendship and a collaborative relationship.
Well, that's what I was thinking about today. I was thinking after years of working together, I think it's time to finally get to know one another because there's a lot about you that I don't know. I'll tell you what I sort of know about you.
Okay.
I know you are a fabulous songwriter. I love your work and your songwriting. I love the way you sing. I feel like every time you sing, it sounds like a record.
That's the nicest compliment.
So I know that about you. I also know some other little things, and you can just fill in the blanks. I'm just going to throw these out there. Mm-hmm. I understand that you are from California. I'm going to go with San Diego, or you lived in San Diego. You also lived in Portland, and then you came here. These are three things I know about you.
Those are all correct, except I'm not from San Diego.
Where are you from?
I'm from Cupertino, which is the little icon on your iPhone.
Yes.
That little map icon is where I'm from.
You're from Apple.
Yes, I'm from Apple. I was born and raised in a laboratory. I grew up in Cupertino in the hills of Cupertino. It's about an hour south of San Francisco. Mm-hmm. I went to a one-room schoolhouse, 30 children, kindergarten through 6. My graduating class of 6th grade was 4 children. Mm. I grew up in the woods. It was like Little House on the Prairie. Like I didn't have neighbors. We don't have sidewalks. We had one neighbor, and then like the next neighbor would be miles away.
Okay, so today somebody who moves to Cupertino, it's pretty clear what brings them there. That whole area has been transformed in the last 20 years.
Yeah.
What would have brought a family to Cupertino when you were growing up?
I think my dad's an American, grew up in Detroit, Michigan, and then worked in... He was avoiding the Vietnam draft, I'll just say this, in the 60s, and he was teaching English at the embassy in Moscow, Russia. Met my mother, a Russian, at a party. They fell in love, and then he spent a year writing letters trying to get her out of Russia. And cut to 1966, they got married. She was one of 3 people to leave Russia that year, and another one of them was Stalin's daughter. So like nobody was getting out of Russia. She got out legally.
Who was she? What was her family?
She was a spy. No, she was a physicist. Her name is Anya also. She was getting a master's in physics at Moscow University, graduated and was working out there, and then met my dad casually at a party. They fell in love, and then he just thought, like, this is never going to work out. We're never going to be able to live together, or be together or marry, but let me just try. So I'm proposing marriage to you. He did this weird proposal where he was like, I'll give you 5 years of my life, and if it doesn't work out, let's just agree to leave or to part ways.
Yeah.
But if it does, let's just look at it like we won the lottery. So he went back to the States, spent a year writing letters to the government asking for permission for them to marry. Nobody would grant it. And then like a year later, somebody said, I'll marry you too. Come back. And he came back. They went through a bunch of red tape. It took like 2 weeks of going from office to office to,
In Russia.
And then they got married, and they came over here in 1966. I can't remember exactly where they got married. They were living in Palo Alto for a while. My mom was teaching at Stanford, I think. And then he just drove around and found this little mountain community.
So I should say, I mean, I always got the sense from you that your parents are smart, that you have smart parents.
They are intellectuals, I would say. Both academics, both professors.
Both professors. So your dad taught nearby
he taught
also?
psychology at Santa Clara University, and my mom taught mathematics at West Valley College. And she taught Russian Lit at UC Santa Cruz for a little while.
So into this multicultural love story, this international saga, steps Anya Marina.
Yep, I just stepped out.
And into the world. Daughter of 2 intellectuals and 1 Russian person.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I've heard you do an impression of your mom before. Some kids aren't even able to hear their parents' accents because it's the sound of your mother's voice. But you seem to have a pretty good handle on this kind of Russian
she doesn't have
identity.
The normal accent, like the normal stereotypical Russian accent is like something like from a movie, or they're very, I don't know why. I think because my mother had a British teacher who taught her how to speak English. She has some sort of sing-song thing that she does like this. So she says words like 27. She says 27, whereas other Russian, like my friends' Russian moms will be like 27, 20. So she can say her W's correctly. But yeah, she sort of would say like, oh, Leo, I was listening to your podcast with Anichka, and it sounded so nice, and her voice was like a flower. So she talks in this sweet sing-songy way. But then when we go to Russia with her, my sister and I went to Moscow, and her personality totally changes around her friends. When they're all talking in Russian, she'll be like, no почему, ну как, ну что? It goes into this weird, like, angry sounding, like, not angry, but like dark, worried tone. It's so interesting. Like, do you find when you go to Spain, your personality changes when you're speaking Spanish?
127,000%. And it's so interesting that if somebody calls me Leo, I will respond accordingly. And if somebody says Leo, I'm almost like...
You turn into like, hey, sexy scarf man.
Scarfo, el scarfo. I do feel a difference. And it makes me feel that language informs worldview as much as worldview informs language. You know, that the way... like Russians are stern and serious and somewhat depressive. That's my cliche. That may or not be true.
Yep.
I imagine that that's reflected in the language. Your impression of your mother reveals that you speak some Russian.
Да, я говорю по-русски немножко. Но только немножко, just a little bit.
Did she speak it to you when you were little?
Yes, it was my first language. And then I think at the age of 2, my father got fed up. He learned enough Russian to get by, but then when I was 2, I think he put his foot down and said, we got to start teaching her English now. So I really am glad for that, because I felt like it gave me a solid Russian base. But I mean, I can barely get by. When I'm in Russia, I'm just like fumbling around. I'm like a 4-year-old speaking. I went to order mineral water. And you can only get this joke if you speak Russian. But I was in line at some museum or something, and I was so nervous because, I'm coming up to this woman, and she's like a sort of heavy-set, larger, stern Russian girl, like 26 or 27, I don't know. And then she's like, no, что? Like, what do you want? And I'm like, водичка, which I thought I was saying, could I have some water? And she goes, водичка. And I'm like, I look at my mom like, why is she making fun of me? And my mom starts laughing. And she's like, you're saying like a little girl would ask for water. And I'm like, what do you mean? And my mom goes, Voda. I just say, я хочу воду. And I'm like, oh, воду. And then the woman starts laughing at me. And she goes, no, с газом или без газом, which means with gas or without gas. And I've never heard that before either. I always thought it was минеральная вода, mineral water. I thought that meant bubbly water. And so I'm like, с газом. And the woman just like made fun of me. She's like, с газом, like making fun of my voice, how high it was, just the way that and when I left that experience, I just got mad at my mother, as if I was like a teenager. I was like, why didn't you teach me how to say voda? Like my whole life I've been saying vodichka. And what does that mean? Why is vodichka wrong? And my mom's like, it's what a child says. It's like you're ordering wawa. Like, could I get one wawa, please? I'm a 35-year-old woman. Could I get wawa with gas?
She mothered you, right? I mean, that's what it is. Which is interesting because, I speak Spanish to my daughter. And interestingly, I have no motherly language in Spanish. I learned Spanish after the fact. And so when she was born and I was going to speak Spanish to her, I realized I didn't have any of the wawa stuff.
Right.
You know what I mean?
The terms of endearment, those little diminutive things.
Exactly. I had to sort of put it together, and I still am like consulting,
But she's fluent now, right?
She understands everything, and she's pretty good. She probably does not speak like somebody who was raised by Spanish parents because I don't say all of the
That's interesting.
stuff.
Yeah.
The vodichka stuff.
That's good pronunciation.
Oh.
Yeah.
Okay, so you are raised in this somewhat isolated environment, two intellectuals. What kind of kid were you?
A dreamy kid. I loved make-believe, fairy tales. I talked to my dogs. I had 2 or 3 dogs. We had 5 cats at one point. I was pretty solitary. So I would just like be playing in the grass and like playing with pussy willows and just like talking to plants and just making up. I felt like my whole childhood was just like in the sunshine with my dogs, just me alone making up stories. And early memories of, when I went to junior high is when I wrote my first song. But I do remember being a very dreamy kid. And unfortunately, maybe not, kind of getting obsessed with fairy tales a lot. I loved Grimm's fairy tales. I liked Disney fairy tales. But I was a little like head in the clouds, sort of like not a princessy little girl, but a little bit of that. I got obsessed with Little Orphan Annie. There's a thing in my web series where I talk about being obsessed with orphans, any disenfranchised woman like Cinderella or Annie. For some reason, for 2 or 3 Halloweens in a row, I was Annie. I wanted to dress in rags. I wanted to eat porridge. I don't know what that is.
You want to eat porridge?
Just all the time.
I did not want to dress in rags or eat porridge, but I also was obsessed with Annie.
Really?
I mean, I loved the soundtrack to Annie.
It was so good.
And I have an anecdote, even though this is about you, Anya Marina. This is not about me. When I was probably my daughter's age, she's going to be 8, maybe a little older, we were visiting New York and we had the opportunity, friends of ours got us tickets to go see Annie on Broadway, and Sarah Jessica Parker was playing Annie. And then they had arranged for us to go backstage and meet Sarah Jessica Parker. And we got to the stage door and I flipped out and couldn't do it.
Oh my God, why?
I couldn't face meeting her. It was too much.
Oh my God, that's heartbreakingly sweet.
I was overwhelmed with emotion and just shut it down.
Probably smart. Plus, New York City, there's crowds. It's a hustle and bustle. People must have been clamoring to meet her at the door.
Well, I think also, to be honest, I think I was a little bit unresolved about being a boy who was so obsessed with Annie.
That makes sense.
It didn't really, wasn't that normal, I don't think, especially at that time.
You're like, I don't want to do this to myself.
Yeah, I think there were too many questions that it opened up.
You're like, I just love the score. I just love these chords.
I love the arranger. Can I meet the arranger? Okay, so you loved Annie. You dressed as Annie 3 years in a row. You said you wrote your first song when you were 14, so you were playing...
Maybe 12, maybe 11.
Was there music in your house?
Oh, yeah. Tons of jazz. We loved, my dad loved the Swingle Singers. Remember all those harmonies? So
yes.
we had like a lot of harmonies in the house.
Yes.
Carpenters, Liza Minnelli, Barbra Streisand, the Cabaret soundtrack, lots and lots of jazz, Miles Davis. My dad was really into Wynton Marsalis, and he's a horn player. My dad plays trumpet.
And did he play around the house when you were growing up?
Very loudly.
Did he have other people that he played with?
Also in the 80s, he had an electric trumpet. So there was a terrible decade where all he was doing was blasting on this electric trumpet, which is just like a weird. Have you seen them?
I've seen the Ewees, which is an electric saxophone. I don't know about this electric trumpet.
I hated it.
Oh,
He would
no.
just he would play along with the radio. But it was just such a cheesy sound. But now he's back. Well, we actually bought him, my sister and I think we went in on a French horn together, and we bought him a French horn a few years ago, which he's really into. He's great. He has a band.
Oh.
Yeah, he just played the San Jose Jazz Festival.
He can play.
Yeah, he's good.
He's good. He's a good musician.
Yeah, he's a band leader too. He has like a little big band. Yeah.
So your sister came along later, right? There was a long period of your childhood when you were an only child.
Yes, it was glorious.
How old were you when she was born?
I was 7.
That would be more or less like what would happen to my daughter, and it would
Yeah.
be highly disruptive for her.
I was pissed because I asked my parents for a talking doll, evidently, for Christmas. I really wanted this one talking doll, which did exist, and friends had it. It was from Kmart. I just wanted this talking doll. And I remember my parents brought me into their bedroom, and they were like, we need to have a chat with you. So, and I remember it was like dark and scary and ominous somehow. And then my dad goes, remember how you wanted a talking doll? And I was like, yes. And he goes, well, you're going to get one. And I was like, I am. And I'm looking around the room like, where? And he's like, it's coming in a few months. And I was like, cool. Why are you telling me this? And then he goes, Mama is pregnant. Do you know what that means? And I'm like, ugh. Like, yeah, I know what that means. Like, I've heard about this. And I was just like, that's not a talking. I'm not into metaphors, bro. Like, just give me the doll. And then she was born, and I was very happy, of course.
Were you happy?
Yeah, I was over the moon. I think I just instantly fell in love with my sister and was just like the little, I totally mothered her. I think I was like excited to teach her things and show her. Like, I taught her how to roll her R's in Russian, like that.
Mm-hmm.
That was a big thing in our house. That story still gets told. Like, Anya taught you how to roll your R's. But no, she was great. She thought all my magic tricks were real, and she thought I was magic. There's nothing like being able to manipulate a young person.
Indeed. I suppose at that age, you've had enough time that you can kind of make a lot of use out of it. You were magic to her.
Yeah.
What a cool feeling.
It was. I liked being an only child, though, for a long time.
Sure.
I felt like I needed that alone time. Can I just get some me time with my parents?
Good foundational me time. So there was music in the house, and your mom, what was she into? Was she into Russian music?
She was teaching. She was into some Russian music. Yes, so I did get that. That's a great question. We would listen to Bulat Akudjava, who was a famous like Russian folk singer, and his stuff was great. Lots of minor keys and guitar, like so almost like it had almost like a flamenco feel to it sometimes. Russian music is so beautiful. There's a lot of minor stuff, but the harmonies are so lovely. Yeah, so I felt like I grew up with these great melodies around me, like jazz and then Russian sort of sad songs. And I feel like that really colored my music. And then there were like TV show themes because I was also like a latchkey kid. So after school, I would watch like The Greatest American Hero and Three's Company and Love Boat and Family Ties, which has such a great theme song. And I feel like those three things, my dad's jazz music, my mom's Russian music, and then she was the one who liked Cabaret and Barbara. And then the TV theme shows, all of that coalesced into music that I sort of gravitated toward and wanted to make. But a lot of Brazilian music too, like Bossa Nova, Astrid, and Jobim. That's the stuff that I really loved growing up too. Stan Getz.
So you did want to be a musician at that? I mean, did you think you were going to want to be a musician?
No, not at all. I wanted to be an actress. I wanted to be on Saturday Night Live. I wanted to do something funny and be in comedy. I was writing letters to Walt Disney when I was like 6 or 7. I wanted to be in movies.
You know, I wanted to be a comedian.
Really?
I know we've talked about this, and you don't take me seriously as a comedian
That's
at
right.
all.
It's coming back.
You never took me seriously as a comedy freak, but I sent you my fan letter. No, the response I got from Billy Crystal when I sent him. Do you remember this?
I forgot.
I sent him a fan letter. He sent me a signed photo back, referenced the joke that I told. I was obsessed with comedy also. I wanted to be a comedian. I'm like a failed comedian.
I don't remember that letter. What did he say?
He said, if you're going, take a jacket.
If you're going to...
It's a whole thing. I wrote him a whole thing, and then I referenced a thing from his special, and then he responded to me.
That's amazing. What's the joke that you told? Do you remember it?
He had a thing about in his special. It was like just after Field of Dreams, and I think he's out in the special opens, and he's in a cornfield, and instead of hearing "If you build it, they will come," he hears "If you're going, take a jacket. If you're going, take a jacket." And so I wrote to him, and I think I said something like, "I've never done this before, but I was just compelled. It's like a voice whispering in my ear told me that I needed to write to you. I think it was the same voice that whispered in your ear about the jacket."
Oh.
And then I wrote to him that I was a fan, whatever, that I love comedy. That's what he said. He said to Leo, "A fine young comic.
Wow.
If you're going, take a jacket."
That's so sweet. That's really thoughtful of him.
It was very sweet.
I'm so bad at signing stuff. I never know what to write people. I just say "with love, Anya."
If it's a jazzy situation, I say some like really ridiculously jazzy thing to people.
What's the jazzy thing? Like jazz hands.
Keep swinging.
Oh, that's cute.
Something like that. Okay, so you wanted
to be...
Did you
ever try stand-up? Sorry, I have to ask.
No, I did improvisational theater.
Okay.
I was a comedy sports kid, which was, like theater sports, comedy sports, and in the Midwest was a big deal. And I was hanging out at 13 and 14 at Comedy Sports, taking the workshops and trying to get onto a team, and ultimately got to play piano for Comedy Sports. That's the closest I ever got professionally to being on stage. But I was like, I wanted to be around it. I had my birthday parties there, and I took the workshops and
at
stuff.
Comedy Sports?
Yeah.
That's so cute. I do feel like we have that in common. Now it's coming back to me that I took an improv class or two in San Francisco, plus an acting class on the weekends. I used to go to ACT.
Totally.
I took a class there, and then I did comedy sports or theater sports in Sunnyvale, I think. And then I moved to LA when I was like 18. No, sorry. I moved to LA at 20.
So let's back this up.
Okay.
So you want to be a comedian. You're writing to Walt Disney. You want to
sort
get on
of like
TV.
a comedic actress. I never had written a joke. I was a fan of comedy.
Who were your people? Who did you want to be like?
I would go see Patton Oswalt all the time. Maria Bamford I got into later. I liked Greg Behrendt. This is before he wrote He's Just Not That Into You. I think I saw Mark Maron a bunch. So San Francisco guys, like guys that would pop into Cobb's Comedy Club. I would go there a lot. I was obsessed with the Eddie Murphy Delirious and Raw albums that I would watch. And then I think Maria Bamford really blew my mind, and that got me more into like alt comedy. And Patton Oswalt was so good. I would get all his stuff. And I would just go up to San Francisco on the weekends when I was like 20, 21 and sneak into Cobb's Comedy Club and watch.
And were you at home still? What did you do at 20?
I lived at home, and I was finishing college. I took the long route.
Where'd you go?
I went all over, but first I went to De Anza College, then I went to San Diego State. First of all, that did not last long. Went home to De Anza College, then I think I was like, I'm going to LA and I'm going to be an actress. I did this program at Stanford called Midsummer at Stanford, and it was taught by Richard Dreyfuss, Ann Jackson, Eli Wallach, Marsha Mason. So it's like Richard Dreyfuss and Marsha Mason were in The Goodbye Girl together, and they were our teachers. And it was a 6-week program, I think. Maybe it was only 2, felt like 6.
And
anyway,
did they see something in you?
They did, I think. I just remember becoming sort of becoming close with Richard Dreyfuss, and he gave me the best advice.
Is that who you're dating right now?
No.
You could tell us.
He's a busy guy, but we make time. He's in LA, I'm in New York. So he said to me once, "You're never as good as you thought you were, and you're never as bad as you thought you were." And I think about that all the time.
Yeah.
Because the ego, it's so...
That's a fabulous thing to say, and it is so true.
Because after a show, don't you sometimes sit there and you just go, "Oh, why did I say that? Why did I do that?" And then you have to remember nobody cares. Nobody's thinking about the wrong thing that you said or the chord that you hit that was a clam.
I experienced that just in social dealing. Running down what happened during a day, I will review something that I said, and often actually put my head under the pillow when I think about it. Like, please take me away from this memory of a thing that I did.
Yeah.
But I totally agree with that sentiment of never being as good and never being as bad. And it reminds me of this book that was really influential to me. And I interviewed the guy that wrote it earlier this year, Kenny Werner, who wrote this book called Effortless Mastery. And one of the things that he talks about in the book is how it's really dangerous to congratulate yourself when something is going really well in a performance, because that opens up the possibility for punishing yourself when it doesn't go well. And it's like you have to just not judge it. And you can't allow for that kind of judgment of your work in that way.
So just be in the moment.
Yes.
Don't be in the evaluative voice. Don't get into the editing voice. That happens sometimes at shows too, where I'm like, oh my God, that was the best moment. And then the next thing I know, I'm hitting the wrong chord.
Totally.
If I'm just like, ooh, we nailed it just then. And then it's like,
the second you take yourself out of it like that. Exactly. So Richard Dreyfuss sees something in you. You guys date briefly.
No,
and then
we never dated.
And then you moved to LA after Stanford.
I moved to LA and I worked at a talent agency for like 8 months, and I tried so hard to get auditions. I lived on a friend's futon.
No college at this point.
No, barely any college, like a few months. And then about 9 months into this, I go, you know what? I'm going to blink and be 30.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm 20 right now, or about to be 21. I don't want to go through life without having a degree. It's important to me. I never felt like I really got the education I wanted. I felt like there were all these big holes in my life, like I don't know about literature. I don't know about really how to write. I would like to get better at writing. You know, my sentence structure is terrible. I just want to read more. I feel like I'm not done learning. And I left LA. And I remember my roommate at the time, who I'm still friends with, who lives in New York now, she said, you know, if you leave, you lose your spot. Like you can never come. You have to like start
Get
over
back
when you come back.
Of the line.
Yeah. And I was like, that's bullshit. And she was like, it's true. You can't leave. And I was like, I'm willing to risk it. So I went home and I went to junior college. And then I got into Santa Clara University, which is where my dad was teaching. And I finished there and I got a great education, which I loved at both places, De Anza and Santa Clara, both great schools. And I got an English degree with a writing emphasis and an emphasis in poetry, Chicano poetry. I don't know why that's how things worked out. But I got really into Sylvia Plath. I got really into
one of the great Chicano writers of our time.
I got really into poetry, different poets, and I got into radio at Santa Clara. They had this great transmitter on the campus that would go like as far as San Francisco and as far as south as like Gilroy sometimes. So I had this great radius, and this listening radius, and I got a radio show there. And so I was in the poetry club and I was doing the radio thing, and I feel like and then I got into a band all during that time. And I got a boyfriend, and the boyfriend was like, you should sing on some of my song ideas. And then he gave me his guitar, and I just spent 3 or 4 years in the Bay Area finishing my degree, being in a band, touring a little bit around around San Francisco and stuff. This sort of like darker band called Andalusia. We did a couple releases. We learned how to record. I slowly learned how to write songs terribly. The band was very patient with me. I was okay, but I just, I would do just sing one note for like, ha. I listen to some of the songs and I'm like, oh no, girl, you're trying. But yeah, I learned how to write a song a little bit. Like I learned how to write lyrics, and I got more comfortable on stage. I was like, oh, I could be a front woman in a band, And then I graduated and I broke up with the boyfriend, and I got a job on the radio on this alternative rock station in San Diego.
Yes.
And that's what took me to San Diego.
So you get out of college finally. You've got radio experience, music experience, boyfriend experience.
Yes.
And you move to San Diego. Now this is like going to start a career.
Exactly. I had been living at my parents' house, smoking cigarettes. I had my degree. I was just drinking coffee every day, smoking, and trying to write the great American novel, like in my pajamas on my parents' porch. And I just remember my dad walking by me and going, that's my BA girl, because I just earned my BA. And I remember thinking like, fuck them. These guys are like harshing my buzz. Meanwhile, I'm living rent-free at the age of 25 at my parents' house. Just like, shh, I'm writing a book, Dad.
I wonder how they felt while you were on your walkabout, because education was clearly very important to them. Did you feel pressure from them, judgment from them? Did they let you just kind of find it on your own? What was that
I
period
wish
like?
I had felt more pressure and judgment from them. They were like these neo hippie. I don't know what they were. Not hippie. They were just like very loving parents that were like, have you applied for anything? Oh, okay, cool. You'll figure it out.
It's probably very healthy to just respect a person and let them figure it out.
Also, throwing stuff against the wall and seeing what sticks helps.
Yeah.
Because my dad got me into, he really did try to push me into piano, flute. I think I took some music theory. Nothing stuck. My mom got me into Russian classes. I think I was like doing Russian workbooks and stuff with her, and I just lost interest, and she just wasn't going to be that disciplined with me about it. So maybe, you sort of like push them in the direction a little and then see
what happens.
Yeah. I wish now I would have stuck with the piano, but I was into ice skating and doing a lot of that stuff, which I almost got my leg amputated when I was 11. Did I ever tell you that story? Oh, yeah. I was an ice skater. It was a week before nationals. And I think this woman, I forgot her name, Roberta. I don't think she meant to. She crashed into me. I came to and was just like profusely bleeding on the ice, surrounded by people. Rushed to the hospital, had surgery. Something went wrong. And like 2 days later, my leg was like I was in danger of losing my leg. Wow. So I was 11 and all I kept thinking was like, this is not going to be cool in high school. Like, I'm not going to be.
Nobody's going to be my friend.
I won't have friends if I only have one leg.
Well, I wonder if your parents, after experiencing an event like that, were just like, she's alive, she's got both legs. Yeah, let's just let her work it out.
Let her quit piano.
Yeah, that's fine.
Yeah. But anyway, yes, I moved to San Diego to do radio.
And what did it feel? I always got the sense from you that it was just like a very natural, automatic thing for you being on the radio.
It was. I was lucky enough to work for this guy, Mike Halloran, who believed in me so much and was just like, he had this attitude of, you got a lot of work to do and we're going to work on your whatever, like your diaphragm and your projection and your voice and all that. But you are the best personality. We like, he was very like, we're lucky to have you, which was very sweet of him.
And what was your personality? I
don't know. I think I was just being this. He was saying that most people on the air were sort of like, hey, a radio guy. And my air check that I sent him, which is like the name of a cassette, like an audition tape, I sent him two things. I sent him my college radio show, which was the B-side, I sent him something called the Circumcision Hour, which I did with my best friend sidekick, Clem. And we were like asking callers, like, call in if you've been circumcised. Like it was like a talk show about that. And this is at a Catholic university, a Jesuit university. And then the other side.
So not so many calls came in.
Yeah. And then the other side was like an audition tape that was really cheesy, which I was a phone operator at 98.5 KOME, New Rock Radio. It was like the New Rock alternative. And I was doing an audition like, coming up, new music from Sublime. I mean, I think he was dead at that point. So it wasn't new. It was like new music from, the Chili Peppers or something. And Halloran heard my air check, called me and said, so the side A is really boring and I don't want you to do that. But I like the girl on side B, Circumcision Hour girl. She's funny. I would listen to her. I want you to do that on the radio, but not talking about circumcisions, obviously, but bring that personality into talking about the Red Hot Chili Peppers. And I was like, oh, how do I do that? But he really helped me shape. He just helped me become more myself on the air. And it did feel natural. And then we got laid off 6 weeks later. And I thought, oh God, I'm broke. My radio station's been bought out by what became Clear Channel. At that time, it was called J-Core. I make no money.
And I live in San Diego.
Now I live in San Diego. I don't even like it here. It's like a Republican beach town, military town. I don't even like the beach or the sun. And I was living a mile from...
Spoken like a true Russian.
I know. And I'll tell you, I feel better in New York. I really do feel more at home in New York. But
well, it was, as you describe your childhood, I thought you got in all of your pastoral beauty early, and now you had to like pay for it later on in life.
Well, when I was getting into Sylvia Plath, I was also getting into Woody Allen and the Beatles' White Album. So all that stuff was happening within the same 2 or 3 years, maybe 2 years. And so I was like thinking about Sylvia Plath and like depressed poetry. And then also like I would love to live in New York, like the New York of Manhattan or Annie Hall, and like, and these neurotic, funny, creative people. Like I was just obsessed with Woody Allen and Diane Keaton.
Did you experience this? So my first experience moving to New York was right out of high school. I spent a summer here, and I lived in the Village and absolutely believed that I was going to walk into a coffee shop and just all of these intellectual, clever, funny, artistic people were going to be sitting around a table, and they were going to look at me, and we were going to know, and then they were going to say, "We've been waiting for you. Like, come on in. This is great. Hey, guys, he's here. He showed up. He moved here." And like,
well, I feel like that is my life now a little bit. Like talking to you, you're one of those guys. Did you not know that?
I feel the same way talking to you, but it doesn't happen quite as, it's not as convenient as you would like it to be when you first arrive. You have to work for it.
Yeah, that's true. When I arrived, I became friends with Nikki Glazer right away. I was on a tour stop.
Yeah.
I had a gig at Joe's Pub. I wanted to have some comedians on the bill with me. I wanted the comedians to open the show, and then I wanted to play a set. So somehow I met Todd Barry. He did 10 minutes. I had met Amy Schumer at the time. She couldn't do the show. She recommended Nikki Glazer, who quickly became my best friend and then roommate. Nikki was like, I was living in Portland, Oregon at the time. This is long after I had left my radio job and I became a full-time musician.
We've skipped like 10 years here.
Yeah.
But so you're talking about when you moved here like 6 years ago.
Yes. Yeah.
And I will say, when you moved here, some people do get to move to New York, and there's a little bit of a vibration that goes out that like, hey, have you heard about this person who just moved here? Like, that's how I heard about you. And I get the sense that by the time you moved here, you had put in enough time, paid enough dues, been signed and dropped enough times that you were a kind of a known entity to some.
I definitely felt seasoned at that point because I had been on Atlantic Records, a little label on Atlantic called Chop Shop.
Which is Alex Patsavas. Is that how you say her last name?
Yes, exactly.
Alex Patsavas' label.
My songs had been synced a whole bunch of times. Grey's Anatomy.
Let's roll it back. Now, hold on. I skipped ahead. Let's do this in chronological order because we're going to skip a thing.
Okay.
We're going to skip something major, which is how you put in all this time on the radio.
I did 10 years on the radio. Yeah.
In San Diego.
In San Diego. It was off and on, stations went on the air and off the air, and I sort of part-time for a little while, but I had a good 6-year-long stretch at my last station, which was called FM 94.9, which still exists, KBZT in San Diego, which was an alt rock station, which it's a little known fact that it was the model for Indie 103 in LA, which blew up and got huge, but they modeled themselves after us. I believe, or maybe it was 92.1 that they modeled it. It might have been 92.1.
And who and how was it programmed?
No talking over music. So, which was sort of radical at the time, like protecting the integrity of the music. So you don't ramp up, you don't talk over the intro of a song. At least we didn't do that. Very little of that. And then we would have really interesting segments. Like I did a show called The Local 94.9, which was talking to local bands, having them in, playing local music. We'd have Frank Black from the Pixies in. We'd talk to him. We'd have tons of, like, Interpol came in. We had all these concerts with, like, now it's not that radical of an idea, but we would put on big shows like the independent, I forget what it was called, but Spoon would play, and Interpol and the Pixies or whatever.
And were you making music at that time or not yet? Not really professionally?
At that point I had already made an album called Miss Halfway, and it's just like an acoustic album with some friends.
Did you have the sense while you were on the radio that you were doing the thing that you should be doing? Or was it a little more like, I feel like I should be doing something else, but this is going well for me right now?
That's exactly the ambivalence that I started to feel like about 4 years into radio. Once I had gotten this full-time job at FM 94.9, I was the midday girl. I had a 401k package. I had benefits. I was making a great salary. I was driving a pre-owned Volvo, which had a warranty. Like I was doing well and I was supporting myself. And I was like, I've made it. Like, this is great. And then I started thinking, what if I could get married and have a family, and I could like do this job. I could have my kid come to work with me, and like I could have a little baby in the corner, while I do my radio shift.
You're seeing all of this.
Yeah, I'm seeing my whole life play out. And as that's happening, I'm reading this book by Dean Wareham. He had written a book called Black Postcards.
Okay.
I think, or Blank Postcard, I can't remember. Maybe it was Blank Postcards. Forgot. But in it, he says, I was thinking about quitting the band, and it became an obsession. And when a thought becomes an obsession and you can't think about anything else, that's when you know you'll make a change.
Mm-hmm.
And I, at that time, so like 2-3 years into my job at 94.9, I was like, this is my life. Like I talk 6 times an hour for 20 seconds at a pop. That's it. I do production afterwards. I talk about like, join us at the local XYZ dealership and we'll be giving away 94-cent tacos at this and such Mexican restaurant, and I was just like deeply unhappy. At the same time thinking, you are working at you have the coolest job. You get to work 4 hours a day and barely work. And then you have this great package. Like, you have an amazing job. Who knows how long it'll last? But the years were ticking by. I was getting older. I was writing all these songs. I had made an album. And I just thought, I just want to get on this. I want to do something else.
Yeah.
I'm going to start using all my vacation time to tour. So I had 2 weeks of paid vacation a year. And I would set up these tours, like solo tours. I went with Greg Laswell, who's a songwriter. And we went up the coast. And it was like the best 2 weeks of my life. And then I came back to my radio job and kept doing that. And other guys would sort of work at the station and have rock and roll lives, like John Reese from Rocket from the Crypt. He had a weekend show at the station. Then he would be like, he had owned a bar in San Diego, and then he would tour like Berlin with his band. And so I could see that people were doing multiple things, but I just couldn't figure out how I could do what I really wanted to do and still, I don't know, feel fulfilled. And it felt like I'm going to have to get signed or something.
Yeah.
So I sent my song Miss Halfway I wanted it to get on Grey's Anatomy, which was a new show at the time.
How did you know to get your song on Grey's Anatomy? I mean, that's like
This funny thing was happening on television where songs were suddenly being played very loudly and lyrics were being heard. And that wasn't a thing before. And Grey's Anatomy was one of the first shows I saw do that. And I was like, why is the music so loud? And then I'd be like, Googling, like this is like at the beginning of Google. It's like I was Yahooing lyrics, like figuring out who is this? Oh, it's Sia. Who's Sia? Or who's Ingrid Michaelson? And I'm like buying music when people used to buy music on the iTunes store. I'd buy like Ingrid Michaelson and who is she? And then it would show all the songs on Grey's Anatomy on the website.
Right.
So I thought I want to get played on that show.
So my understanding is the reason the music was turned up so loud is because this woman, Alex, had a new way to market music and place it in a way that hadn't been placed before. She was like the sync guru, right?
Yes.
She was a person who understood that you could get music placed on shows and it would change the way people think about music and about the show.
Exactly.
How did you end up on her radar?
I sent my album Miss Halfway to Alex, I believe. And I think I sent it to like 100 places or 50 music supervisors. I sent out all these packages. And then like a week or two later, I got a phone call from someone saying, hey, Anya, it's, Andrea from Chop Shop, and we'd like to use your song Miss Halfway in Grey's Anatomy. And I said, fuck you.
Because that was exactly what you wanted.
I thought it was my friend. Yeah, I thought it was someone playing a joke. And they were like, could we speak to Anya Marina? And I was like, so sorry, hold on. And I'm like, hi, this is Anya.
This is Anya, 27.
Different voice. And then it was them, and they really wanted to use the song. And it was like I got in the season finale, and they used like a minute 20 or something. Like they used a large chunk of my song, and it was in this montage. Like, the main character is in the elevator with Patrick Dempsey, and he's finally about to kiss her, and then there goes my song Miss Halfway playing, and then it cuts to somebody dying on the table, and then it cuts to somebody being born or whatever, and I'm just like, this is amazing.
And you still are working at the radio at this point?
Yeah. But I got a nice check, and I was driving around a totaled car at the time, almost totaled. Someone had hit my car in the middle of the night, and I was crawling into the passenger side every day, and then driving to work and hoping that none of my coworkers would see me crawling out of the passenger side door. This is before I bought the Volvo.
Uh-huh.
And then I got the check from Grey's Anatomy, and I bought myself this pre-owned Volvo.
I see.
And I was like, this is my Grey's Anatomy car.
Right.
And and then I started thinking maybe I could make a living at this. Like that was a nice little check to get. And I started to make an EP, like a demo of other songs. I started to fund it myself with this guy, Brian Karsig, who was in the band Louis XIV, who was on the radio.
Okay.
We were playing them on the radio. That was the upside of being a DJ. I had met all these great musicians.
Well, that's what I was going to say. Like, I know that at some point you developed a relationship, a friendship with Jason Mraz. I know at some point you developed a friendship with Jewel. I always assumed that
they were just like in town.
Yeah, that you met
They'd
them
be
as a
hanging
radio
around.
person.
Yes, as a radio person, and also like playing the coffee shop. Jason he was like a colleague. But you're right, I did meet them. So there was a little bit of a power dynamic. So I think I had the luxury of being treated with more respect because they'd be like, oh, it's Anya from the radio station.
Uh-huh.
You know? Maybe I got some extra gigs that way. I don't know. But I think people also liked my music. But then I started to make this demo, and then Alex Patsavas, you know, she knew me at this point. She put a couple songs off my record, I think, in her show. And then she came to see me a few times at Hotel Cafe. And I remember.
So you were going down to LA sometimes to play.
Yeah. Yeah, I was starting to play on, you know, anytime I could. Playing a lot, actually. And she took me, I remember she said, why don't you stay overnight after your show at Hotel Cafe and I'll take you to brunch the next day. And I was like, okay. And then I stayed over. I played this great show. She took me to brunch. I got drunk at brunch. And then I remember she asked me at brunch, like, so do you have a lawyer? And I was like, yeah. Oh, and I played her some new songs I was doing on this EP that I was funding myself. And I was so tipsy that it completely went over my head that I was being offered a record deal. I just remember thinking, why is she asking me if I have a lawyer? Oh, she wants to know if I have my life together or not.
Right.
Because if you have a lawyer, it means you have your shit together.
Right.
Yeah, and I remember going, yeah, do you? She's like, yeah, I do. And I said, yeah. And she goes, what's his name? And I tell her his name. And she goes, maybe we could have our lawyers meet. And I had no idea what she was talking about. I was just like, cool, yeah, like lawyers should meet. Like they just might want to know each other. And the next day I had been sent this offer, like a record label offer. And it was like, oh, I should quit drinking at some point. Like, I don't know. I'm completely missing these important signals. That was a huge game changer. I got offered a record deal. And then I think a couple of months later, I quit my radio job, which was agonizing because I had a great salary and I had a great job and I had the coveted position. I had worked for 10 years to get this job.
Yeah.
And I walked into my boss's office. I'll never forget Garrett Michaels, my program director. And he goes, and I was crying. And I'm like, I don't know what I'm doing. This is such a big risk. I'm going to have to move to LA. I don't want to leave San Diego. And I don't even know if this is going to work. And he was like, you're always going to regret this if you don't do it. And if you don't quit, I'll fire you because this is your dream. You're good at it. You write great songs. You should be out there playing songs and shows and putting songs in movies, and you'll just always regret it if you don't. And he goes, you'll always have a job here if you want to come back. If you change your mind. And it was the nicest thing anyone's ever said.
That's wonderful. So you moved to LA.
I did.
To make the record.
I finished the record in San Diego. When it came out, I moved to LA because I was just driving up there all the time for press and stuff.
Did they give you money to make the record? Did they pay for the record?
They did. That all is sort of unclear. I can't really remember. I remember like having an agreement with them where they would reimburse me for the album. And then I think they paid for half of the record. But then I remember, I should get paid for that.
At some point.
I should get reimbursed for that. But yeah, I basically funded the first part and then they paid for the rest. And God, it was expensive. Like mixing is so expensive. We got I can't afford him now. Ken Andrews mixed the record. And I just remember it was like having every song get plastic surgery on. Yes. I mean, he didn't just mix it. He rearranged stuff.
Did you like it?
At first I hated certain songs and then I realized he's a genius and he made hits of some songs. I mean, not like radio hits, but he really took a sweet demo from a sweet demo to like, oh, that's a freaking hit right there. Yeah, he was good.
And how long were you in LA before you moved to Portland?
Just 2 years, not even that long. I kind of got fed up with LA. I never have liked LA. The only thing I like about it are my friends that I have there and a couple good Korean spas to go to. Did
you have your record deal and a publishing deal when you left LA?
It was a 360 deal with Warner Chappell and Chop Shop Atlantic.
So when you signed that deal with Alex, that's you got a publishing deal, you got everything came to you. And after 2 years, when you moved to Portland, you still had that 360 deal?
Yes, I did. Ended up being with Warner Chappell for many, many years, even after I split from Chop Shop Atlantic. But with Chop Shop,
amazingly, you're actually still with Warner Chappell even after leaving Warner Chappell. You made made a web series about yourself after you left Warner Chappell, and they paid for it, or they distributed it somehow.
I don't know if that fact is public knowledge, but they may have funded it.
Okay. I just know it's on the Warner Sounds
it is.
YouTube channel, however the details are.
They don't mind having a show about them dropping me on their YouTube channel. Watch it. It's called Anya Marina, Independent Woman, and you can watch it on the Warner Sounds YouTube channel, or just go to anyamarina.com.
I suppose if people have made it this far into the interview, Anya, you've earned the right to plug your website.
You can take the DJ out of San Diego, but you can't take. Wait, sorry. You can take San Diego out of the DJ, but you can't.
Wait, how does it? The DJ is here with us.
You can't take the DJ out of me.
That's true. So you moved to Portland.
I was up there. I wanted to make a second record, my sophomore one, and Portland was so cool in the mood of it, and it was so dark. It like instantly got me. And I was friends with this woman, Heather Larimer, and she was in this cool French band called Aux Autres. And I said, can I just stay in Portland for a couple weeks in your condo that you have that's empty? And it's like above the best coffee shop in Portland, which is called Extracto. And I said, all I want is good coffee and great Wi-Fi, and that I just need to be alone in a place for 2 weeks and write a record. And she goes, yeah. So I rented her condo, and I left my LA apartment, and 6 or 8 weeks later, finally left Portland. And the thought of going back to LA filled me with such dread that I just ended up going to LA and getting a U-Haul and leaving. I'd never really came back to LA. I never moved back in. I think I just emailed my landlord and said, I'm going to come home and move on XYZ date. And I left most of my belongings in Portland, came back and bought a house. It was the best decision I ever made.
Wow.
Yeah. At that point, I had already made a record with Chop Shop. I had done the Twilight soundtrack, I think. So I had a song on the Twilight soundtrack. We did just a tour for Twilight, like the New Moon, Twilight New Moon. And it was a big deal. And so I had a little bit of money, and I bought myself a little house.
Do you still have that house, or do you sell it?
I do. I still
You do?
have that.
Good for you.
I
That's
rent it.
great.
Thank you. But I sold the Volvo to move to New York.
So you had the Volvo all the way, and you were in Portland for a while as well.
I was in Portland only 2 years.
But you were making records, or you were kind of on the scene there.
I made an album. I don't know if I was on the scene, but I made a record I love called Felony Flats, which is the name of a neighborhood in Portland.
Uh-huh. Were you co-writing and stuff?
I was not yet. I think I got into co-writing after Felony Flats, and I started to branch out and come to New York. And then when I moved here, I would take trips to Nashville. Mm-hmm. Actually, right when I moved here, Warner Chappell got me set up on these great songwriting camps, and I met you. You were one of the first people I co-wrote with.
Really?
Yeah, Something Sweet was one of my earliest co-writes, which ended up on my album, Paper Plane. We didn't even think we thought that would be a commercial song, and then I was like, I want this on my album.
Well, I was going through a thing at that time where I had been doing a lot of commercials, and I was getting set up on co-writes by publishers because they wanted somebody with a commercial background to help their artists write for sync. But I was also extremely frustrated with writing for commercials, and I was looking for an opportunity to write with artists. And so I kept doing co-writes that were supposed to be commercial co-writes, and then doing strange things like we did on that track there. It's rhythmically a little bit wonky, because I was actively shedding the commercial skin and trying to do more artistic things. And I was more interested in just talking to people. I mean, I don't know if you remember this, but you and I had this conversation. We met, we had a conversation, because I was new to co-writing too, about your life. Mm-hmm. And I think you had actually at that point just started dating somebody, and you said you didn't want to get swept away. And you went to the bathroom and you came back, and I sang you that first line.
Oh, wow. I don't want to get swept away.
But I think that was your line that you had just said to me in conversation, and then you went away and came back, and I sang that line back to you.
It's just so funny because the guy that I'm dating now loves that song, and he said, so I have a question for you. So you don't want to get swept away, but the woman in this song, she does want to be swept away. And I'm like, And he goes, and so do you. And I was like, I know. You get it. You get me. I both do and don't.
There's another line in that song, which I don't know who came up with the line. I bet it's you. And it always spoke to something that you've also alluded to, but that I think you live with all the time. You say, I don't want to get drunk on you.
Mm-hmm.
And, you tell the story about getting drunk at brunch with Alex and realizing that might have been one of the early signs that you needed to like put that away.
Yeah.
I mean, you've been sober for a long time.
9 years.
Well, what was the thing that
made me want to stop?
Yeah.
It was sort of like shortly after getting signed. Yeah. I think there were I'm a big journal writer.
Uh-huh.
So I remember reading my journals in Portland, and I had gone through many, like, I don't know, just like moments where, you just wake up and it's not just a hangover. It's like an emotional hangover. Like, what am I doing? Like, what was last night about? It wasn't even that the amount I was drinking, but I just could feel myself getting in my own way. And I'd read my journals and just see like, oh, this person, me, keeps doing well and things are going on an upswing and she's doing really well. And then she drinks and everything seems to slowly crumble and she doesn't connect that it's the drinking. Like, I thought it was like this guy or that guy or this failed job or this failed opportunity, or why is everybody doing stuff to me? That's sort of like the girl in the journal. But I had this moment of clarity reading them one day where I was like, oh, there's a common denominator here. And why don't you just try getting out of your own way? And so I had many attempts where I would try to quit for short periods of time, and then I just couldn't do it. But I would feel good while I was doing it, but it's like I never really was committed to doing it for forever.
You say it wasn't about the amount, but I mean,
every time I drank,
it
was I couldn't really control it toward the end. Yeah. So I just started to see that it wasn't working. Nothing about it was working, and it was emotionally taking a huge toll, and I was just sad a lot, and I was like, oh, it's a depressant. Go figure.
And you were Russian. I mean, I know it's a weird thing, but that is in there, right? And that cultural point of view, regardless of your mother's like high voice that she learned how to use.
Yeah.
I imagine some of that's in there.
Yeah, and it's like I felt like I was such a sensitive person already, being a songwriter and an artist. Like, I'm very sensitive. So then you pour alcohol on top of that. It felt explosive, or not even explosive. It just felt like, well, I can't handle this. I'm too sensitive for this. Like, I let other people drink.
Right.
I can't do it in a way that works for me. And everything got better. Everything really got better as soon as I took that element out of things.
Did you do the program? What'd you do?
I did get support, and I still do that, and it's wonderful, and I love it. And I don't think I could do it alone at all. Yeah, I can't believe it's been 9 years, like clean and sober. No, nothing. Like I once in a while will take an Advil.
Oh, really? It's that? It's like Christian Science.
No. It's just you don't actually need a lot of pain. I haven't had a big surgery or anything.
Right.
But I've never not used any painkillers, nothing.
Caffeine? Are you off caffeine now too?
No, I drink tea. I drink a lot of tea, and coffee is okay. But that was a big game changer for me, and everything. I became so much more creative and happy, and I felt like my songs got better, and I was able to write more honestly. Like, Something Sweet is a pretty clear song.
Yes.
Like, there's a lot more self-awareness in my music, I feel like now. But I definitely am fascinated with songs about addiction, whether it's to a substance or a person.
Well, that was what struck me. I mean, I don't know if I knew that you were sober at that point when we were writing that song. I probably did, because we got in there pretty fast about stuff. But I don't want to get drunk on you is an interesting line, because it's like sort of saying like, it's really not about the substance itself. It's about me. I know myself, and I have this tendency to like take it too far, and I don't want to do that. Although as your new friend has suggested, maybe you're saying that you do want to get a little bit drunk on this person.
Yeah, I mean, we all want to get swept away by love, and that's part of falling in love, is being a little swept away.
Yes.
And there's nothing wrong with that. But I also want to stay stable and clear enough to not get ahead of myself. Like, I can fantasize my way into being in love with someone that I don't even really know. I'm just in love with the fantasy. And I think we can all, or many of us can relate to that.
Sure.
Just like, I can create a whole life in my mind, or a future with someone who I don't even really know. And that's part of the thing maybe that I grew up with in the woods, like playing with my dogs and like playing make-believe and all of that, just creating a little life and a fantasy. And Orphan Annie, she was fantasizing about maybe someday being with a rich family, right? Or like being plucked out of that existence.
Or you were fantasizing about having your song placed on Grey's Anatomy, and then they called you.
You have to dream. It's important to have hope.
It sounds like when you kind of pursued the dream of music and you got signed and then you went to Portland and then you came here, that you had put away this part of your personality that was like the radio, into comedy, into that.
That's true.
I understand you saying when you came to New York, you would try to connect with comics and stuff. Because now you have a whole sideline where you have a show on Sirius and you keep a lot of company with actors and comedians, and you did the web series, which allowed you to kind of be a comedic actress.
Yeah.
Did you find moving to New York allowed you to put that together again?
That's so great to hear you say that, because it helps me make sense of my life. And that's why these interviews are interesting, because I don't have the objectivity of that. But when you put it that way, it makes sense. My life is making more sense
good.
to me. Yeah, I always used to say that performing music helped me understand why I had done what I had done before, which was like all these improv classes or theater classes. And I was thinking, why did I major in poetry?
Mm-hmm.
Why was I in that band? And then once I became a singer-songwriter on stage, I was like, oh, the poetry makes sense because I wrote these songs. And the improv and acting stuff makes sense because I speak in between my songs and I try to have this sort of like entertaining show with little stories and vignettes and things. And so it all sort of made sense. And the radio part made sense because it also helped me become more of like a host personality. And it helped me connect with the people that helped me make my records, like you said. So now, yeah, I think in maybe 10 years ago when I was making Felony Flats, or 8 years ago, whenever that was, I was just fully committed to doing music. And I thought, like, I'm a band person now. Forget comedy, forget performing. All I care about is like making a great album, and then I'll just be touring all the time with the band. And then something didn't feel like it was totally connecting, or it wasn't fully authentic. Like it was fun, but it wasn't that fulfilling to me. I didn't like want to go play with them forever. Like, it wasn't like my goal to get to Coachella. I remember my booking agent being like, what do you want to do? Do you want to play Coachella? And I was like,
no,
not really. Like, I'd like to make interesting songs for like indie movies, and I'd love to play cool shows, and I want to play theaters, and I want to tell stories and do that kind of thing. So now it feels like I'm sort of formulating this thing with Independent Woman, the web series. It felt like, oh, this is interesting. I can take all of my anecdotes from my show and kind of put them into this TV show thing, for lack of a better word. And that has actually informed what I'm going to do next, which is I'd like to do a one-woman show in a theater and do these songs and help there be like an arc, sort of like this podcast. Talking about this podcast will help me write my one-woman show.
I do try in these conversations for there to be a beginning, a middle, and an end. I mean, I try to arrive somewhere. You have this thing that you do over and over again in which you're triangulating. You know, you're saying, well, it was the Russian music and my dad's jazz, and it was the TV shows. That was the sacred geometry of melody that I used. So, I mean, I think that you're also constantly kind of trying to put things together in 3 acts in a funny way.
That's funny.
And you actually put your songs together in 3 acts. You write bridges, for example, which a lot of people don't do. This is one thing I want to talk to you about, and it has to do with your songwriting. Because, you know, you're not brand new. Like, you've been at it for a while. But you have this sensibility in the way that you write songs that feels extremely fresh to me. Are you thinking about that? Are you thinking about trying to stay
relevant?
Yeah.
I mean, it's interesting to hear you say that, and I like it because I remember when I made Felony Flats, the record label girl who was 10 years younger than me said in an email, I love it. It's so 90s.
Oh, I hear that stuff all the time. I hate that.
Like, oh, it is? I just made a record I liked. I wasn't trying to be retro at all. But my influences are 90s, I guess. Yeah. So I like Liz Phair and Pavement and Elliott Smith and stuff like that. So I'm not trying. I don't know if I'm glad you think I sound fresh. I hear new music.
Well, I'm like your age,
like,
so of course.
Yeah,
I think
maybe we don't
fresh.
know. Maybe we're not that. Like when I hear Taylor Swift, I'm like, oh wow, how did she think of that? I don't know if my changes are that way, but I've been trying to work with not trying. I've worked with some younger people in Nashville, and so I like their ideas and they're interesting to me. Like Ian Kagi, the guy that produced Serious Love with me, which was a 4-song EP, and then he also did this track Over You. His melodies they're not intuitive to me at all.
Oh.
So like, I mean, I wrote the melody, I hate when you go, but I hate when you're here. And then he came up with these cool chords and stuff. But like, there's a song on there called Cut You Loose that I never would have written, and I love it. But he just came up with this phrasing that I wouldn't normally do. So, and Over You is so fresh and young sounding, but I can't take responsibility for that. He practically built that track. The lyrics, yes, but I feel like he thinks of certain things that I'm like, whoa, okay, I like that. I never would have thought of that. Like coming in on, like he'll have a whole phrase before the one, which is a great technique.
And after having written so many songs by yourself, was it hard to get into a zone where you could like hear somebody else's ideas and recognize when you think they're good? And
sometimes it's like almost nauseatingly uncomfortable in the writing process where I'm just like, what am I doing? Am I going to regret this? Is this terrible? This isn't even my sound. And then it helped a lot to talk to somebody. I don't remember if it was you or someone else. And they said, these songs sound so different, but it's great because it's always you. You always know an Anya Marina song. And I was like, you do? They said, yeah, because it's your voice. You could do anything and it still sounds like you. So that was comforting in a way, that my voice is enough of a signature.
I think that's true, but I also think that you're a clever lyricist. I mean, I think that there's something very automatic and intuitive and intelligent and plain spoken at the same time in your writing. And I can't help but think that it's a combination of having grown up around literary people and then forcing yourself or encouraging yourself at a certain point to say, like, that's why when you said, I haven't read enough, I want to read more, that was an impulse that you had. And I think it's in you.
Thank you.
Do you prefer hearing laughter in a concert or applause?
Laughter, definitely.
Me too.
Because it means that we're having a conversation. The audience and I are experiencing something together.
See, I feel like I'm just not fucked up enough to be a comedian.
I feel the same way. I feel exactly the same way. I don't think I'm fucked up enough either.
Well, what do you think you are then?
I think I'm a storyteller and I can tell entertaining anecdotes, but I have never written a joke, nor do I want to, but I enjoy telling stories.
Anya Marina, thank you for telling stories today.
Thank you, Leo. Thanks for having me.
There she was, my friend, the lovely and talented Anya Marina, telling the story, laying out the journey, and doing it in that natural way that a truly comfortable person on a microphone can do. Someone who's and doing it in that comfortable, natural way. You know what I'm trying to say. What I'm saying is she's a person when she's on the microphone. It's comfortable, both for her and for the listener. I'm going to go check myself in somewhere, and I'll talk to you soon.